Testing. Testing 1. Testing 2. Testing 3. Testing. Testing 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 3. 1, 2, 2, 1, 3. It is a test of the 1 and the 2 and the 3. No, put the testing 2. Oh, it's working. Excellent. Yes. So I have returned, and well, I don't know. You don't have a need to know what I'm doing, but I am working, and I was running down to last bit of money, and I owe some taxes from taking out retirement last year. So it's good I've got work. Happy about that. Situation is that one company I decided, okay, how about if I just work all for you for a couple years? They were a little slow off the block trying to get their investments. You know, it would be a second wave of investment, but the first wave would be just from the original founders. So anyway, let's see, where was I? So I couldn't work for them in this other opportunity doing a really neat project for a really big company. So I had to take that for 4 months, and that might be more work if I do it well, which I think I'm going to do it well. But I still want to help that first company, so I'm working for them. Like this weekend, I've been working for them. I'm taking a break to do this, which oddly enough, when I'm looking for work, it always feels like, do I have the time? But part of the point is to go ahead and take the time. So what are the issues I've been thinking about lately, which is the topic of this virtual TV show here? One, it's still, I was thinking of looking up this comment on this feminism thing. And I think I will. So let's see how you do. Previously read, if I guess. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so Seth Hamilton in this thread, it's like almost 300 comments long now. Oh, you're a to me, in reply to a video I'd made saying, well, should I read that as well? Let's see if I can find that one. Something, this dude said that feminists spend all their time on hangmen or something like this. And I said, I'm a feminist. I spend no time on those things. Are you actually talking about Twitter? And then Seth Hamilton says, oh, you're feminist, huh? Just curious, what actual issues do you concentrate on, and how do you do this? And I said, my experience with feminism has never required that. Instead, feminists have always been helping me with more general issues, anti-war, labor issues, other working class issues, supporting progressive candidates. You see, we thought a lot of progress had been made on feminism, but we were wrong. The most important issue in feminism is the worldwide state of the legal treatment of women. And so he replies, and this is where I was really going to start. Quoting me, my experience with feminism has never required that. And what would quote unquote that be? So you don't concentrate on actual issues to do with gender? Yeah, the point is feminists are helping me with the general purpose issues. I haven't really. I mean, I would support Roe v. Wade, but I thought that was secure, He quotes, feminists have always been helping me with more general issues, anti-war, labor issues, other working class issues, supporting progressive candidates. He says, you don't need feminist ideology to do any of those things. Well, there's people from feminist organizations like, you don't need feminist ideology to have political debates. No, but the League of Women Voters is, historically a common sponsor, has enabled that to happen. Without them, it wouldn't have happened. And they're in the game because of feminism. So as far as we know, you do need it to, for 20% of your activism labor. Then he quotes me. You see, we thought a lot of progress had been made on feminism, but we were wrong. He says, yes, you were. All those issues above were never and will never be impacted by this ideology. Well, I just said they were. Those people showed up. That's impact. Your Twitter, blah, blah, blah. Well, maybe the virtual world is going to become more real, but it still doesn't compare to getting outside. And then he quotes me, the most important issue in feminism is the worldwide state of the legal treatment of women. And this is the funny part. Oh, so you've been going to third world countries then? So I'd have to go to third world countries to say or think or to have enough information to profess that this is the main issue for feminism. I don't think so. Surely you won't act as if your ideology is doing something for those women while sitting on your arse at home. I think my activities outside of my home and at home, for that matter, in terms of information activism, online, it has done as much good as an individual. No, not as much. Some individuals do an amazing amount, but as much as it hasn't accomplished as much as I'd hoped, but it has accomplished some things. And I have helped get, I've helped a woman get elected, so I think that I have done things out in the real world. Now, did I improve the situation in Nairobi or whatever? Well, set your bar just arbitrarily high. How about? Did you go to third world countries? Are you rich enough to travel around and see and help? No, I don't need to do that to get the information to know that's the most serious thing and not the only thing in feminism. So I said, I just told you some issues I dealt with. War is a gender issue. It's mostly men dying. Feminists are always present at anti-war activism. So obviously, I know firsthand you are wrong, and feminism does work on those issues. Your fantasy internet Twitter-based reality is what never does anything actual about real issues. And no, I'm talking about leaving my house, actually working for a political program, candidate, or issue. I have a feeling you are the one doing all this thinking from your arse. So this other dude, Ben Baker, says, so you and feminists, you work with appeal to the patriarchy for change? And I'm going to say, what? It's just so stupid. You can't deny that feminism was necessary. It's just impossible. And you can't deny that it's still necessary in most of the world. It's just impossible. You can't deny those things. Those are demonstrated, well demonstrated. But people would like to say, oh, well, this person has gone too far. That, well, what do you mean? When somebody says, I'm a feminist, and therefore that proves all men are bastard rapists. Well, that has to reflect on feminism. No. Just like if somebody with delusions thinks that they teleport to the moon, that doesn't reflect on the space program being a waste of time. No. There are people that exploit any kind of victimhood, that exploit any kind of situation. At every situation, people are always trying to gain advantages by gaming the system such that they get an undeserved reward from the system. Like monkeys playing pachinko trying to get extra treats. It doesn't defame the laws of physics that human beings can figure out ways to game the system. That's just the fact of nature. Okay, so if some person, a woman or a man, somehow can manipulate our emotions about the knowledge that feminism has been a necessary thing, to manipulate us when they couldn't care less about feminism, or even if they do, the primary point is to manipulate you, then that's a manipulator. That might be a problem with the way we think about things, that we're easily manipulated. It reflects not at all on whether or not standing up for gender equality and equal rights of some sort, uh, whether or not that's important. And it obviously is important, and we obviously haven't solved it, because for one thing, there is no equality. I mean, men are not going to get uterine cancer. Women are not going to get prostate cancer. We are different. There's going to be some level of significant physical differences that affect medical funding in a socialized medical system. You have to decide, how are you going to allot the monies and whatnot. You can't ignore one, for example, or, if all this male doctors were men, and there develops a bias against understanding things that only affect women, maybe there's an issue there. And we're going to have to learn to look at that. So that means gender issues are going to persist. It's not a temporary issue. As a matter of comparison, think that race issues are somewhat temporary. I don't think any of those differences by race are significant. I think someone's skin color is about as significant to me as their eye color, right? So I think that one will go away. But gender activism is not going to go away. Gender issues, and there should be a men's rights movement. And I like when I see men's rights activists that actually do things, a shelter for male victims of physical abuse, or et cetera, et cetera. I've said many times, for example, with feminists being so active in the anti-war, there was definitely the biggest single plurality was probably feminists that are protested the Iraq war, that all my fellow citizens were for until now. Somehow we're against it retroactively, right? And feminists were probably the largest plurality there. And a thing like war, labor's 50-50. It may or may not show up. But the feminists do, and that's a men's rights issue. It should be. War should be a men's rights issue, because it kills a disproportionate amount of men. And these things are natural. But the reactions that I'm seeing against feminists are, you can probably on YouTube, you can look up film from the 60s. And people have always been making this bullshit up, like the whole bra burning feminists. That never really happened the way they said. That wasn't a thing. They made that up. Just like they make up stories about any of our enemies, domestic enemies of the state, that they deem that. They make this shit up, right? It was never a feminist thing that you can't wear a bra to support your breasts, or that you can't, wear sweatpants when you exercise. I mean, you can wear whatever you want. These things are made up. And a lot of the whole vibe of, well, you're a feminist because nobody would fuck you, you're a lesbian, and you're like a guy, and all of this stuff, you're just playing a victim. White knights. This is all, again, you could find videos of people in the 60s just openly saying this too, and it's evidently in vogue with one of these internet subcultures that is real, legitimate, in a sense. It exists, it is a thing. Is just carrying on what is a really old knee-jerk reaction to feminism. And you're doing it now in the 21st century, when most of the world is in need of feminism. We need to succeed with feminism as a way to get it to other countries. It's not supposed to create a bigger conflict like you guys would have it be. You know, and I've met women that use their feminist concepts that way. I've met women that went to school and got degrees in feminist, you know, in women's studies kinds of things, that didn't really, that just exploited it. I would not be surprised if there aren't men that have done women's studies and exploited it. And every other study that there is, even the sciences, right? But if somebody goes into physics because their real motivation is they want to lord it over other people, how they're smarter than them, that doesn't discredit what somebody actually doing physics is doing. It doesn't discredit that, right? Human beings just are that way. They apply that psychosis. I was going to say abnormal, but I can't say that it's abnormal, but whatever. They apply this exploitation psychosis against anything, any endeavor. You know, you could have you invent the most purely altruistic endeavor you can think of, and there's going to be somebody that just wants to look altruistic. So it doesn't necessarily reflect on, for example, bringing it back to what I'm talking about, fighting for feminism. The fact that you can find Twitters, twits that tweet all the time. They're twitty tweets about they hate men in a certain way. They're just riling you up. So I'm going to judge the movement by, first of all, philosophically, if it has a place, if it's apt for the world. And as a movement of people using that, I'm going to judge first the people that are out there trying to get a progressive candidate or a candidate elected, that are working on various things in labor rights and human rights in general and peace activism and things like this. I'm going to judge those people first. And people that just talk a lot of shit at parties with their friends, which now they can do it online, they can tweet just like they were talking their bullshit, that it's weighted, right? It's a weighted formula where that is multiplied by 0.00001 in terms of its actual weight. People just talking a lot of shit, that's not going to define what feminism means or social justice means or any of that. I understand it's distracting to all you all, but you have to sort the wheat from the chaff. And it's easy to talk a lot of shit. And it's harder to just spend a day doing something, you know, that's hopefully going to have an impact and likely won't. Because activism is very disappointing in general. It doesn't matter. Activists would find the same thing. You go try in politics to get something done the way you want it done, to fix something, you know, and whether it's selfless or ideally, it requires a sense of self, and it's in everybody's best interest, including your own. Well, it's just the kind of reactionary block you get to these ideas just because they're new, let alone everybody's trying to sense that it's, oh, that's something I already know about. That's communism or this or that or the other. It's not an idea to be judged on its own, but and usually you fail. And when you do succeed, let's say you get a candidate elected, it's hard for them to live up to the standards that you built when you were supporting them and working for them for free. And sometimes it's even worse, and those people turn out to be kind of backstabbers and stuff. But I haven't had that. I luckily have not seen that, but I have seen people that I thought did not capitalize on the situation politically, that made subsequent missteps after I helped them succeed to a level like getting office. But you know, I've known people. I know a guy that it was his idea to to do People's Park in Berkeley and turn that into a park. It was just rubble and an empty lot. And to me, looking at that, I thought, well, that was a big success, but he had hoped for a lot more. You know, he wanted to see the world really, you know, fixed. And now, by now, he's in his 70s, and it hasn't happened. And you see activists that stick with it, which most people don't. They peel off and do other things, but for various reasons, many legitimate, all of them potentially, you could say legitimate, it's a personal choice. But people that stick with it, they often either go this way of having to realize cynically how much lower their standards, the world will never improve even incrementally enough to meet their standards in their lifetime, or they keep a lot of the rhetoric and they sort of sell out in some way or another. They just get themselves comfortable and keep talking about the stuff. And there's values to both of those things and emotionally personal reasons to take them. But feminists are an interesting group of activists because to a certain degree they did seem to have a significant amount of success empowering women, at least officially and in the law, equalizing things. And yet they did keep working even after that point. The feminists that I would run into, right, in general, a lot of people, fell away, but the people that kept going, they work in other human rights areas, and as I'm saying, peace activism, for example, and yet they don't have to be as cynical about not having achieved anything, because people that work in labor rights and stuff, the basic economic system has not at all been rectified. It's crazy. We're still bailing out bankers that are doing illegal things, and we bail them out instead of the people that got suckered into the whole scam. Whereas in feminism, it certainly looked like we had some success, there's Roe v. Wade, and of course women can vote, and, more and more rights to have property, and there's examples of women executives, and the inequalities look like maybe they're going away. Feminists remained vigilant, but in my experience, worked on a lot of other political things. They realized that social justice and maybe feminism could have even gotten them into it or be their primary motivator, but there's other very related things, that the things that make you believe in something like feminism lead you to believe in social justice in general if they're honestly held. Right. So they're working on other things with the rest of us that we're still working on, and we're all trying to remain vigilant. And there's always states that are trying to close down Planned Parenthood, and you put some effort into that kind of thing. But in a sense, the feminists are one of the few activists that could feel in the 70s and 80s that they had, and 90s, and until recently, that they had succeeded in passing one of these thresholds where you're not going to lose the right, to choose. You're not going to lose, are you? So, but there's still people that want against it, but they look like they've lost it and they just won't give up. Well, all this kickback of feminism is making it look like, no, there is pressure on that dike even. We could lose this basic progress that we have. And it's, of course, just a reason to not only need feminism, but to move back and return the favor that for the last 20 years, feminists have helped the democratic process, the League of Women Voters, women's organizations have done a lot of good, and empowering women has done a lot of good for social progress, and social progress needs to return the favor, basically. And so, I think that the men's rights movement might benefit as well, because of course part of all socially conscious human rights activism oriented persons, if one of the first things you do if you're going to go and be feminist is you do make a distinction, like they're begging for, between man-hating radical feminism and liberal feminism, gender equality feminism, which definitely exists. There's definitely the kind of feminism most influential in our laws is just saying, well, they should be able to vote too, and for that matter, they should be able to work, which means if they can afford a one worker family, the man should be able to stay at home, and men should be able to do their feelings, and women should be able to assert their strategies. And yeah, I think that they've enabled uh, men more than men's rights activists have so far. Now, there is this issue in Canada within the guy that committed suicide and stuff, and Aaron Pizzi's story. I do believe in that. I think that there's been a problem. I think that my coffee's out. I should go get some, but I think that there is some bias in, like, if you're making shelters, why do men need shelters? There, I've run into that. So I think that that's something that genuine feminists and genuine minimists uh, should join forces on. I think men's right activists and uh, women's rights activists are a natural force to join forces, over things. So anyway, well, I'm out of coffee. It's 15 minutes in. That's well, I started early, didn't I? I mean, I did testing for like 5 minutes. I'm trying to kill time because usually I think ahead of time. This is just all off the top of my head. So, well, not entirely because it's stuff I've been thinking about. So, yeah, and I didn't make up those comments off the top of my head. Those were really from YouTube. So, there's the whole illusion and object thing, but I'm not sure I have the energy. I think maybe I'll go get some coffee and see if I even feel like continuing. There's nobody in here even chatters. So, yeah, not cool. Okay. Well, here's my empty room. All right. Well, there's birds coming around. Another thing I've been thinking about is, we all have this, there's this phenomena we know about, we take part in to some degree online. This is kind of fun. Let's see, how do I close it though? Turn that off. When you're obsessed or very interested or continuously long-term interest, when you have a long-term interest in something that you dislike. So for example, in high school, Michael Jackson was really popular, and when Thriller came out and stuff, and I wore a little button that had his face with this red circle and a line through it, right? It's a matter of protest. So what justifies that kind of thing? Politics. I followed politics, and it's pretty despicable. There's a lot to hate about it. So what justifies when you have this long-term interest in something you dislike? Now, in the case of politics, I think it's pretty clear. It's a strong, influential thing. It's affecting your life every day. If you pay attention to what's going on, you can see that. And therefore, you have reason to, to be active, to be vocal. Now, in the case of Michael Jackson, it's a little bit different, and I think I've evolved on that. I don't spend so much. I don't see him as, even though I was vindicated in him being kind of creepy, and I still think that it's, unfortunate all the energy that is spent on pop stars like him. It's a net positive. Anybody with the talent has a talent, and people enjoy their artistic output. I'm more open-minded than I used to have been, but still, what was I thinking at the time then? What justified it? Well, just the popularity. It seemed so influential that I just wanted to say, fuck you, let's listen to The Cure or whatever. I just wanted to make this statement. And then I thought of a third reason. So that's two reasons. One, you're being vocal against something influential, right? And that kind of goes for Michael Jackson, but I can't say he was influential in the same way that geopolitics is. It was more that I thought a lot of people were listening to him, so I wanted to make a counter argument. Now, the third thing is, I was thinking, well, when it's not obviously having a strong influence, and it's actual physical influence, and it's not arguably having a strong intellectual influence, it's just something out there. Like, for example, the atheists ragging on the young earth creationists. I didn't even know there were young earth creationists out there. And they're kind of saying, no, look, they're out there. So what is that? What justifies that sort of obsession? And there's a couple things in there. So one is just that kind of saying, well, it's more of there's potential to it. Two kinds of potential. One, it actually has potential to attract people, or it's bigger, or there's hundreds of millions of dollars going into this. It's a phenomenon you just didn't know about. There's an awareness thing, which implicitly is saying it's influential enough to know about, and to think about and stop any encroachment, or at least be aware of. Similarly, there's just like, well, it's interesting, just unabashedly, it's interesting, and I'm against it. So when I talk about it, I'm going to make fun of it. And then there's this final thing, though, that happens online. A vibe people give you if you're just doing this kind of YouTube thing where there's no fame, there's no influencers. It's just another kind of phone, but it's a party line, and everybody has access to it. And that is, people give you this idea that you have potential. You could be using your potential. So your negative influence on the world is that you could be having a positive influence. It's like the kind of pressure your own family might give you. You could be doing better, and you're not. Therefore, I will be obsessively negative about you as some sort of psychological plan to help you fulfill your potential. So what is that, like 5 different reasons? So when you're obsessed about something that you dislike, and I'm using obsessed loosely, I'm not saying like diagnosably obsessed. I just mean when you keep spending time on something you disagree with. And so many people, when I have continued to criticize someone like Thunderfoot, they're like, why even bother? Just go do things you like, man. And meanwhile, Thunderfoot's whole thing is finding things he doesn't like and bitching about them. It's like, well, I'm doing the same thing Thunderfoot does. It's a hobby. So, yeah, the secret sixth reason is, of course, people just like to try and find a whipping boy. They want somebody to take their shit out on, and when they find somebody they think they can take their shit out on, then that's what them do. Ah, that's my Grand Canyon mug. It's a lovely mug. So, so there's that. There was something else I was thinking about lately. What was it? Oh, it slipped my mind. It was some information theory thing. See, this is why you have to do these things regularly, because, you know, when I was doing it regularly for just even a few weeks, people start showing up. You skip a couple weeks and people are like, oh, does that still happen? And I checked out Gary's room last night around midnight, and there was just a bunch of tiny chat wastoids in there taking it over. I don't know what that was all about. So I guess Gary doesn't do his thing anymore. It's over. No, you never know. You never know. But what was the other thing? Something to do with this information processing. I mean, I think I'm getting somewhere. Now, Hythloday doesn't agree with me or anything. It wouldn't seem like, but I think we're getting somewhere because at least he engages the issues. And I think it's good. Like if somebody's making a point that you think is mock-worthy and you mock it, that I think is fine. So I don't think that deters at all, assuming you're actually bringing up the thing they bring up. You know, you're giving it the importance that they think it deserves. So, for example, on the willpower, but even more innately, it's this stream of consciousness. We have this stream, and it's multidimensional in the sense that vision is a dimension, sound is a dimension, and then there's this dimensionality that we kind of think they all can adhere to, which is this sense of space, right? What is similar between vision and sound? Pretty different. Or what about vision and sound and smell? And there is an answer, though, and that is our sense of space. We use our sense of space in correlation with all the other senses. So if you think of it as its own sense, then it's something we apply to our sense of vision and sound and stuff. There's a likelihood, I think, that it is its own sense, abstracted second order or third order sense. But it could also be that the sense that sight itself has its own sense of, that we call it's the visual spatial sense, and sound has a visual spatial sense, and smell, while we don't experience it directly, there's evidence that dogs do, and we can have experiences of it having its own spatial sense, and that our abstract mind, our reasoning mind, is able to see, look, what is the similarity? It's the space. All this information, it seems so different. The color red from the, you know, the note B, they seem so different. You know, how could you even compare? And yet the comparison is that they seem to happen in space, right? So the sense of space seems to cross all of these. And yet you can have a color and a sound happen in the same location without interfering or affecting each other. You could have just the sound, just the sight, both of them, a different sound in the same site, mix and match, they're orthogonal. And thus, when you have orthogonal, information, then each one of those orthogonal spaces is a dimension. An orthogonal one-dimensional space, you add three of those together, you get three-dimensional space, four of them four-dimensional, and so on. So we're getting a multi-dimensional information stream that has all of these aspects at once over time, multi-dimensional, played out over time. So like a movie, but in addition to sight and sound, and in addition to the sight being much bigger field of view and whatnot, and different than a movie, and the sound similarly, you get smell and the feeling of touch streamed over time. You get all of your other sensations of hunger and attraction and lust and beauty and whatever. All of those feelings, you can have like a data structure coming through your mind that is all of those, and you actually get them fused together. By the time your conscious mind at least gets to process it, the sound and the sight of something has already been unified. And you have this appearance of what seems to be the case. Oh, there's a coyote and it's walking in the forest towards me. That is what I'm calling the illusion, because that is just how things seem to be, the unified. But we know that it can be reduced, that there can be an explanation made of why we're seeing that particular thing. And in the case of coyote, it's primitive thinking to say, well, I'll explain the vision of the coyote. What is it? There's a thing called a coyote coming. No, there is a system called the coyote with all its muscles and everything. And why am I seeing it just like that? It has to do with the light source. It has to do with my position, the coyote's position, their velocities, and the way our positions are changing. And so I can explain what appears to be the case with information. And then that information is what appears to be the case. And I can explain why that appears to be the case. And if I keep doing that, not only do I get lower and lower, but sometimes I realize, well, this appears to be the case because of a misunderstanding. So for example, the sun appears to rise in the morning. The information is what's really going on. The earth is spinning, right? And it's going around the sun. That's not obvious within 24 hours. So the main phenomenon is that the earth is spinning, right? And the sun is staying still. That's what's really going on. That's the explanation of why it appears, is because I'm on the surface of the earth, and as I move slowly enough that I don't feel that motion, it looks like the other things are moving as a result. That information is also an illusion because the sun is also moving, for example. There's more explanation of why it appears that the sun is stationary. Well, the sun appears stationary because it's so massive that we are rotating around it, that it can control our path more than we control its path. Now we have an influence on its path. It's also orbiting our center of mass. But because it has more mass, it appears that we're going around it. And so this is still another level of information, right? Sometimes as you break it down, though, things like the idea that the sun rises ceases to be information. It's just illusion. So you have layers of illusion, how things have appeared to be, and you have at the bottom your information, which is your current explanation of the last illusion, which itself seems to be true. So even beforehand, before you get there, there's going to be something that explains why it appears to be true. And some of it will simply be an illusion, and some of it will sort of still be a part of the explanation, right? It'll be the residue of what appears to be the case, what still appears to be the case, right? And this is the echelon of information and why we have this why we have skepticism, why we believe things appear to be the way they are, and we accept that they are the way they are. We seek to explain why they appear that way, and in doing so, the appearances over time actually change. And it's hard to do. The sunrise is a great example, though, because it's hard to do, but you can, if you watch a sunrise. It takes 15 minutes or something, and you watch the sunrise, you can pretend that you're on something spinning and that you're just coming into view of the sun, which is stationary. You can pretend that, and that's what's really happening. So when you pretend that and feel like, hey, that's what's happening, you're actually feeling, something more informational, right? You're feeling that, wait, I'm moving. It's staying in the same place. And you feel that, feels like you're pretending, but in reality, it's more accurate, and you can build a sense of intuition that way. Now, in the case of the sun, I've never done this enough to just naturally feel that way, but I know from other examples that if you kept practicing this, eventually you would feel like you're on this globe spinning around. That's how your brain would just every moment consider itself. That's the situation it would visualize itself within, right? So now, do we have to do that? Well, no, because there's always going to be layers of illusion. The skeptical mantra is just that to remember that the level of information that we're at is always itself another illusion. And yet we've gotten low enough that it looks like, okay, there's this quantum reality. And there, the illusion, the necessary illusion, is that we see a particle as hitting a screen and making one dot, right? Whereas the reality looks like the potentials are all happening, and it's unclear why we see just one dot. And yet there's some laws like the uncertainty principle that ensure that there will always be this gap between our measurements and the information that explains what something is really doing, the difference between what it seems to be really doing and the information we can get about what it's doing. And not only that, but it's not clear which is the illusion. One of these is the illusion and one of them is the information, but they can both play both roles, right? So you have the particle being the information, the fact, the speck on the photographic paper as the information, and the illusion being that the photon is a wave when really it's a particle. Or we have information about this wave stuff we've tested and gotten information. So we have this idea of the wave, and the illusion is that it's a speck on a piece of paper. And the information of why it appears to be a speck on the piece of paper is in the wave model. And some people want to say, well, no, the speck on the piece of paper is the information, and the illusion is the wave. And why it appears to be a wave is because it's making this particular kind of speck. See, and so we debate a lot, really, to me, where I'm like, look, the reality has got to be this higher dimensional thing so that it can appear to be one-dimensional. You can't have the real thing being one-dimensional and the illusion being higher dimensional unless you figure out something like a hidden variable theory, which there's reasons you can't do, right? So this is what we debate from my point of view. And you can't have information, the illusion that the cherry is red, right? That it looks red. The information about that is really just about the photons and the light source and how it gets to our eye as this phenomena that then we tag with red, right? So, if we just have information about those photons, themselves, and it's not what they appear like. There is no illusion of what the painting looks like, what it looks like as a fantasia. Then you couldn't have information. I mean, the whole idea, for example, about the information of, well, here's the visible light spectrum and blah blah blah. It's all with respect to the fact that we get an illusion from it. Or you create a Geiger counter, we can get the illusion that a photon strike detection is a sound. You have to create some sort of illusion, meaning some sort of impression of what it seems like to a human being, that then you explain with what we call the information. So any experiment, any data taking, you will always go ahead and analyze for yourself, and I believe you will see, as I have seen, that there's always a how things seem to be and what it really means. It seems that the red line is up a scale to 32 degrees Fahrenheit, and what explains why it seems to be a number 32 is that it's reacting to the temperature. So it represents the temperature, and that's how information always has to work. It has to have some uh, uh, what I'm calling an illusion, which is really just however something seems to be. In other words, things are always moving and changing, and we're doing data processing. And so no matter what something seems to be, that's necessarily us doing some data processing. It's not what the thing itself is. That cherry isn't red. It has a behavior where it reflects light and whatnot, and this wavelength of light gets converted to red. So it's translatable to red through this process of seeming to be red, but actually having an explanation through neurology and optics of why it appears red, when in reality, color is introduced, in the mind. What is the information out there? When you have this attitude, the issue of objective reality or an external reality or anything like that has to do with the persistence of information, right? I can write a book, all humans could die, and some alien race could come and decode the information that I've left there to some degree. They could decode information, right? So my belief that that's true is me stating that I believe there's an externality to this information, whether we're in Vishnu's dream or a bunch of gears and levers or a big wading pool full of quantum waves or a matrix, even a sub-universe of some sort. That is all interesting and would matter, but it wouldn't change the fact that the information persists beyond the stream of information I have, right? So I get the stream of information, and when it stops, I'm dead. I'm gone, and maybe I'm just unconscious, and I'll wake back up. But let's put it the other way: when I die, I believe that that stream is gone. Does information, for example, information I might have encoded in a physical structure somewhere, does that persist? I believe obviously it does. So even without other people existing, I'm not a solipsist, because I believe that I can encode information into the universe or decode it, and that it's actually in the universe after I've encoded it and before I've decoded it. So I think this rectifies a world of psychological analysis and philosophy, which is necessarily information oriented in the real world, through this integration of the idea of information and physical processes, through the realization that if we want to make a quantum computer and the universe is already working on quantum means, then the universe is a computer. And it would actually have worked even with classical mechanics if, when you create a machine, you put in an input, you pull a thing and the result is that some wheels spin, then you're basically taking one kind of information, true, false, and turning it into another kind of information, a cyclic thing. So basically anything physical is a computer, because you can always look at its initial state as information and its result state, its final state, as the result of a computation. And you certainly can do that in quantum mechanics, and thus we are all the results of some sort of mechanical computation. Not necessarily a classical one, obviously, since that's been overturned with quantum mechanics, but we are some sort of a quantum computer or regular computer or whatever you want to call it, in the sense that you can look at the universe this way, because we're getting the stream of information. If you look at the state of some system, you're looking at the information you can get from it, right? And that's its parameters. Those are its starting state. And then when you look at it later on, that's its intermediate or final state after some computation. You could keep computing and find the further state from further computation. Now in nature, these computations are all, a lot of them are random number generators, but that's still a kind of computation. They take a random input, they create a random output, except wait, no, their output is probably only random because their input seemed random, right? So no, they're honest to goodness computational entities. And the problem is only, there is no problem, but the problem per se is that they're not useful computations. So we want a tiny little subset of computations which are useful enough for us to make a computer to execute, and we like to call those computers. But the end result of all this is, okay, we still need computers to do these special computations that are useful, but when we're philosophizing and at the same time are natural philosophers, we finally have an integration here between these two fields from the philosophical point of view, and potentially from the physical point of view as well, from the physics and scientific point of view, but certainly from the philosophical point of view, that what we're dealing with is information processing, and information truly is a physical thing, and it can be encoded in the world. And we get some amazing new concepts from the physics side of natural philosophy, where information is understood as states of physical things, and that entropy is understood as unknown states. And because of quantum mechanics, that's a huge distinction, because in the unknown state, a thing is in a superposition. It's all the possible. And only once it's transferred into the known state as it collapsed into a particular instance of what we then can store as encoded information. All right. So it's far from clear exactly, but we have some sort of a link there where we gather this particulate information about a dynamic, complex, fundamentally wave-like and not particulate phenomena. You know, we pick a little bit of information out about the wave. If you do that a million times, you can actually get a good picture of what the wave looks like, even though each time you sample it, the wave, you get something that's kind of randomy or stochastic mixed in. Over time, it fills in a pattern, right? And if that's what's going on in physics, then the fact that we as human beings, and probably all animals, experience the universe as a stream of information and our reaction to it and ability to process it, but whatever our, in most general, in our reaction to it, then those are the same things, right? Information in physics and information in the human mind and how it transfers back and forth is not some sort of a magic, doesn't take ghosts or a world of platonic forms. There really is no jumping over a threshold from one kind of world into another. That's an illusion that we can explain why it appears that way based on quantum information theory. So, all right. That was an hour. Cheers.